Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, where we help new and beginning teachers navigate through those crazy first years of teaching so you can maintain your sanity and personal life. Here's your host, Kim Laprie.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kim Laprie, and this is the podcast for new and beginning teachers who don't want to just survive those first few years, but actually thrive. Today on episode 53, I'm continuing my series of replays of episodes where I interviewed principals and asked them about what they looked for when interviewing candidates, but also they did a mock interview with me. And you may have noticed that this episode is airing on Thursday, April 11, and normally I air my episodes on Monday. But what I wanted to do was give you 2 episodes a week, so it would be 2 interviews per week, so that you can practice each one for a few days and then add more questions and practice with those questions until you've got these questions down and you can answer them confidently and really feel like you're going to nail that interview. Also, don't forget that for each interview, I've included the questions in the show notes. That way you can practice along with me. And I even think it would be a good idea if you were to have somebody interview you so that you can sort of get the same feeling for what it's like to be asked on the spot. So if you're driving right now while you're listening to this episode, go ahead and come back to the show notes so that you can review those and practice.
Hey there, this is Danny Sunshine Bauer from Better Leaders, Better Schools, and the School Leadership Series, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts. Make sure you check out all the other great podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com and get ready because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1.
Today, I have an amazing guest, Asia Cunningham, who is an administrator in the Wake County Public School System in North Carolina, and she just finished her first year as the assistant principal at Briar Creek Elementary School. Having been an instructional coach, Asia gives us so many valuable tips for both new and veteran teachers. This conversation is definitely packed, so I know you'll get so much out of it. Also, when she conducts the mock interview, she offers incredible feedback that I know you guys will find helpful on your next interview. So here's my conversation with Asia. Could you tell me a little bit more about the demographic of your community and of the students in your school?
Briar Creek, I don't know how much you know about the area that I'm in. It's very transient, so our population is about 33% African American, 33% white, and then we have Asians, we have German, we have French, Vietnamese. It's very balanced. Another 30% that comes from very different cultures. Mm-hmm. There's about 28 languages spoken in our learning. Yeah.
Wow. And in terms of like the setting, is that more of an urban setting?
No, it is not. It is not urban. It's kind of like, I wouldn't say it's like in the middle. It's a very good mix. You have some of the suburbs population as we're surrounded closely to a golf club. You have some students that come from the urban population. You have some that are just in that, the base population, local neighborhood.
Okay.
So it's a really good mix.
Yeah, it sounds like that
environment.
So when you're looking for new hires, especially when you're hiring a teacher fresh out of college, what are some of the qualities that you're definitely looking for so that you know that they're going to succeed at Briar Creek?
For me, I'm looking for passion. I'm looking for that learner, the teacher who knows that beginning teaching is a learning process, right? There are going to be things that you're really good at, and there are going to be things that are tough, right? So how resilient are you to the changes that you'll have to go through? And are you able to communicate when you don't know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that's okay. Because sometimes owning and saying, you know what, I don't understand this is difficult for teachers. So if you don't know, are you able to communicate that and say, you know what, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know how to do this. You know, that's the piece that we don't always do as teachers, is say, I don't know. We try to figure it out. And then sometimes it's too late when you're going, I don't know what to do. You know,
Right.
because the earlier we can get that support to you and groom you, then the less overwhelmed you'll become on the other end of it.
And then the same applies to if you have veteran teachers that are applying for the position. Are there any qualities that you look for knowing that they do have experience that are different from beginning teachers?
Absolutely, because Briar Creek and the way we do school is a lot different. I mean, we do what's called flexible seating. So we have hokey stools, bouncy balls. It's not a traditional learning environment. We're very rich on technology use.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, I'm looking for that same quality. Like, can you make the adjustments to what would typically be a standard classroom? We're very much student choice. We like our students to have choice in when they're collaborating or creating different projects with each other. So it's not a sit and get environment.
Right.
And so we're looking, just when we're hiring a veteran, to see someone who's like, hey, I'm up for a new challenge. I want to try something different that I haven't done before. And you're looking to see, for both candidates, can you relate to children? Can you build relationships with children? And what does that look like for you? We are in hopes that all teachers, no matter who they are in a place of being a lifelong learner themselves, because the field of education is always changing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's always something new's coming down the pike, and you're having to make that adjustment. And so having the characteristic of flexibility is very important.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure that when you're interviewing, if you have someone who doesn't like technology or think it's bad for kids, that would be a definite red flag.
Well, my question, not necessarily a red flag. My question would then become, if you don't like technology, tell me a little bit more. It would intrigue me, right? Because we all know that students are now coming out by age 3. They can operate devices like they've been doing it their whole lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at how can we now take the technology that we know that child has been seeing since they were 2 and 3 and enhance their instructional opportunities, right? And so it doesn't mean I wouldn't give you an opportunity, but it does mean that I would want to know that you're in a place to learn how to truly integrate technology into the learning process.
Right. So they'd have to be open, but if they make a blanket statement that it's harmful to kids, that could be something that's a little bit, I don't know. For me, if I were in the interview panel and we were as maybe one-to-one or technology rich as your school is, I would kind of have doubts if someone automatically just said that technology is harmful and that there's no use for it in the classroom.
Right. Certainly.
Yeah. Okay, so are you ready for the mock interview?
Are you ready for the mock interview?
I am. I'm like going to start sweating bullets here. Let's do this. It's been a while since I've interviewed.
I know. So let me ask you a question. Have you done any research? You want me to interview you from the Briar Creek perspective? So have you done any research on my building?
I have looked at your school website, and that's about it.
Okay. All right.
And that might be something that's actually not so good right off the bat. I would always suggest to interviewees that they do as much research on a school as possible before they go in.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say, is that any teacher going into the school, because a lot of times I interview teachers and I say, why do you want to come to Briar Creek? And the first thing they tell me is close to home. And so I want to know that you know what the heartbeat of that building is. Like you want a teaching job, yes, but you also want to make sure you're buying into an environment that's conducive for you, and that would allow you to grow and develop and support children. Right. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have a full connection to the school vision and mission, that sometimes limits it.
Right.
It limits the work that you can do. All right. So Tell me a little bit about you and your teaching experience with your cooperating teacher.
So I have been teaching. I just finished up my 16th year of teaching. And throughout my career, I have been an elementary band teacher. I was also a high school marching band teacher. And then I transitioned to middle school band, which was my passion. And about 10 years ago, I decided that I wanted to transition to teach English. I noticed that a lot of my band students were struggling in their English classes, and they just really hated it. And I thought, if you just had some engaging teachers, or if you just had more engaging lessons, I bet you could really love reading and writing. So I switched over to English and have been teaching 7th grade English ever since, and I absolutely love it.
All right. Good.
Did I answer your question?
So how do you did.
Was there anything that I could have improved on that?
No, that question is normally like a lead in for me. I want to see, are you comfortable? Can you articulate about who you are and what your learning experience has been as a teacher? Mm-hmm. And so that opening question is always going to be, no matter what administrator, typically majority administrators, they're just trying to ease you in and find out how comfortable you are with you and what the process.
Okay.
So no, you did good. So tell me a little bit about how you empower students to become involved in their learning process in the classroom.
That's a great question. I think that student choice is really important regardless of the level that students are at. A lot of times, teachers are very top down and they just tell students to do assignments and the students do it, and they comply. And I think that when you give students the opportunity to choose something that they feel is appropriate for themselves and that they are actually interested in, then they are more likely to complete the assignment and learn. So in my classroom, I do have set lessons where I teach them the skill. And then when it's time to practice it, especially because I teach reading and writing, when it's time to write, I give them choice in the subject that they write about. I also, at times, depending on if it's, a specific writing unit like argumentative, or it's more of just, let's just write in our journals. If it's in their journals, I'll let them choose the writing genre. But otherwise, if I tell them we're going to be writing a narrative, I give them a few parameters, but for the most part, I don't want to constrict their learning. And so in as much as possible, I give them that kind of choice so that I can still make sure that what they're producing, I can grade with a rubric and track their progress, but at the same time, they feel that they have their own choice and voice.
Okay, good. That was going to lead into my second question, actually, about once you gave that project, how do you assess and evaluate students to determine they've mastered the standards?
It can be difficult if you're doing just, basic, like really involved projects where students have complete choice, like let's say Genius Hour. I know that for a lot of people, when they do Genius Hour projects, the rubrics are based on the choices that students make, and they give them basic parameters for the final product. But someone could give a speech, someone could do a video, someone else could do a skit. And I like to make sure that I create a rubric that can be, in general, all-encompassing, but is focusing more on the learning and thought process that got them to that product as opposed to just the product, because the learning happens along the way, and that's where I want to see, can they apply these skills that I've taught them in real-life situations?
Okay. All right. One thing that you said that was very intriguing to me is that there are multiple ways to determine if a student has mastered the standard. You talked about they can act it out, they can write it, like given that opportunity for different ways to express their own creativity. As a teacher, how do you build relationships equitably with all the students in your environment so that they're able to demonstrate mastery and reach their maximum potential?
I know that first of all, I know that students have different preferences in terms of how they learn. And I know that there's some research that say, no, it's not. Some are kinesthetic, some are visual. And I do believe that they just have their own preference. So I've seen where some students absolutely love writing, and I will give them that opportunity if they want to do a writing piece that I want them to feel comfortable where in the mode that they're using. Other students who are a little more social, maybe it's because of the YouTube generation, they'd prefer something like Flipgrid where they can record themselves and have that be their submission. And so they still do have to write it out because I want to make sure that they have all of the elements included. But for them, they feel much more comfortable if they were able to speak it instead of write it. And then I have quite a few artistic students who maybe want to create something where they can include their own art in the submission. And I allow them to do that as well because I do like to have visuals when they're doing projects. So I just try to throw out options and have them also sort of pitch to me what they're thinking of doing so that we can see if it aligns with my rubric. Now, this doesn't go with every single assignment because, of course, I still have to teach skills, in like a small lesson setting and then have them go and apply those skills. But overall, I really try to have them have as much choice as possible.
What does a typical day in your literacy classroom look like?
When students come in, I have the warm-up immediately on the board. So I've trained them since the beginning of the year to come in and take out their composition books because I do like a mixture of writing on paper as well as iPads because we're a one-to-one school. And they will do the warm-up silently. I have about 50% students with IEPs in my classes. And so there's a lot of me going around and redirecting and making sure that they're getting their materials out. And then I have them also, share what they've read. I really like this part because it gets them to interact with their peers. And it's more in a low risk environment because they've had time to plan it out. And so students are really comfortable with interacting with each other when it's time to do group work later on because they're used to that process. And a lot of what happens in my classroom is, I'll give a short mini lesson on a skill and students practice it together in groups and then they work on a product for me. Now, I wanted to ask you about that. Now, I've had other principals say that they're not looking at the lesson plan, but they're looking at the environment. And I'm wondering which one you're looking at.
I'm looking at the level of engagement from the children. I'm looking at the involvement in the instructional delivery from the teacher. And I'm looking at the student's ability to articulate what is the objective for the lesson I'm in right now.
So would you want that all included in your candidate's answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would. And those things don't necessarily come in one question, right?
Right.
But for example, in talking to you in interview, I can already tell that based on the layout of your classroom, you're circulating throughout that environment to ensure that the expectation you gave the kids is actually being done in that classroom.
Okay.
You already said I'm allowing them to share, which I know they may not want to write, but they look forward to having an opportunity to share with their peers. So while they know I don't necessarily want to sit and do the writing, whether it's type it on the iPad or write it on a pen and paper, I'm going to be given an opportunity to share my engagement, right, with someone else. So it's not just I wrote it and then I put it in my desk.
Okay.
And then, third is, can that student articulate why they're doing that writing assignment? Are they going to say, I'm doing this writing assignment because it's morning work? Or are they going to tell me that because right now I'm working on building a nonfiction story about how to wake up in the morning? I don't know. Are they able to articulate why this is the particularly assigned writing assignment?
Okay.
Right. How does that, everything that you're doing should be going back to address the standards that you're teaching.
Right.
And so involving the student in that process empowers them to do the expected outcomes of the lesson.
So I missed that part. I should have included that.
Well, doesn't mean that, again, when you're asking questions throughout, those things that you as an administrator are looking for are often answered multiple different ways during that interview process.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You put the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's the interview process, right? Like that's why you're asking specific questions to the interviewee, so you get a well-rounded view of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you do in terms of your students that are unmotivated. Like, I don't want to do it. What does that look like?
I think this is important because a lot of teachers, actually all teachers face this. We all have students who don't want to do anything. And it's really our job to make it so that our lessons and the material that we're delivering is engaging. I know that there's a philosophy from a lot of teachers that they're not there to be fun or to make the students like them. But if a student isn't interested in what's going on, if you're not delivering it in a way that makes them want to do the work, you're going to be frustrated because they're going to be sitting there looking at you. So I do a lot of work right off the bat to create relationships with my students. They come to my class knowing that it's fun. And the reason why having a fun classroom is important to me is because I find ways to trick them into learning. I sneak in the learning there while we're all enjoying this, happy environment where everyone feels that they can take risks without being made fun of or bullied. And so when it does come to a student who doesn't want to work, it's usually uncharacteristic at this point because I've created that rapport with them. And so I will, kneel down next to them and talk to them one-on-one and find out what's going on. Maybe the previous night they didn't get any sleep because they had to go to the hospital, or maybe they actually don't get it. And that's why they are just slouching in their seat, not doing it. And they don't want to look stupid and make a mistake. Or maybe they really just don't feel like writing that day. And I usually can negotiate with them. Hey, can we at least get a couple of sentences on here? I'd really appreciate that. And because I have that rapport with them, they'll do it when I request it, and then usually they end up doing the assignment in general.
How do you ensure parental involvement in the learning process in your classroom?
I definitely think parent involvement is a key to students succeeding. They could have the most amazing teacher. A student could have the most amazing teacher, but if they come home and there's no support there, a lot of times students, especially younger students, they'll have a really difficult time being motivated to do it themselves. So I do my best to reach out either through phone calls or emails or sending letters home so that parents can stay involved, parents can stay up to date with what we're doing in my classroom and the students' grades. But I know that ensuring 100% participation isn't possible. Even with all of the tools and technology that we have, there are just some parents who don't want to be bothered or are unreachable. And at that point, if it's at the detriment of the student, then I'll also alert that student's counselor or maybe even one of the administrators if it seems like the student is being neglected because the parent isn't paying attention to them.
So part of that question for me as an administrator, I'm looking to see what avenues are you as a teacher going to employ in a attempt to make that happen.
Okay.
So here's where you're looking for. We all know that parents aren't necessarily getting involved or they're not in the process at home sometimes, right?
Right.
But what avenues as a teacher are you taking to make that process happen? I'm texting, I'm calling, I may be doing a home visit to that child that I'm really struggling with.
Okay.
Right. So, you're looking for, even though parental involvement is sometimes hard, a big part of it is also motivating the parents to help enforce what you're doing inside of the classroom.
Right.
This research showing how impactful that parental involvement piece is for not always lower learner, because sometimes we always focus on the lower performer,
right,
but also the motivation of those higher performing and middle students as well. So we're just looking to see what avenues of communications and relationship building is the teacher having on parents in the environment.
So like how far are they willing to go to get the parents involved?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I'm assuming, especially with a more transient population, that's particularly important to get them on board so you guys can play catch up if you need to.
Right. Right. Like, how do you engage the parent who's not an English speaker? Right. So
right.
that means I need to reach out to my ESL coordinator to figure out, hey, can you get me a translator over so that I can have that person here so I can communicate to the parent? You know, so you're looking to see, is the parent just going to not be engaged? And the teacher's going to be like, okay, I just can't reach them. Or is the teacher going to go to different extents to say, I've tried multiple avenues to reach that parent and I wasn't successful? One last question is, what ways are you a collaborative working colleague? So you're going to be expected to work on a team. Sometimes that grade level, depending on which one you're in, has 5 to 7 people, right? So how do you collaborate with a team to ensure your voice is heard and you can get what you need, but also you're giving for the better good of the grade level?
I appreciate the fact that your school does have teams. I think when teachers work together collaboratively, especially interdisciplinary teams, it makes it so that the material can be applied across different subjects and students can see the point of everything that they're doing. So I have actually worked on collaborative teams like that grade level where we all taught different subjects and everyone wants their pet project to be taught. And everyone wants to have, for example, in math, they wanted to do a baseball unit and they wanted all of the subjects to somehow contribute to this baseball unit. And it didn't necessarily align with what everyone else wanted to do, but we knew that it's important for the students to see that connection across subjects. And so we, if I was writing something in the argumentative genre, I would find a way to weave in baseball history or, baseball statistics in there as well so that I could play my part. And then if I had a unit where I wanted to teach, mystery or something like that, then I would, employ my other colleagues and see if they could find a way where we can somehow connect on that. I think it's actually a really great opportunity for students to have their teachers working and collaborating that way.
And also because we want to make sure that as teachers, we're modeling that for our students, right? And so here, an administrator is going to be looking for the teacher to recognize that, I can't do this educating all the students in my classroom by myself.
Right.
Right. And so I know that my team is also another layer of support. And if I'm struggling to reach a kid, I can connect with a teacher on the grade level. If I'm struggling to plan my content, sharing in that planning experience, sharing in the data, like we come together, we plan our instruction together to match the standards that we're teaching, right? So we're all backwards mapping. We gave a common assessment on this standard so that we can share in the data to see how did your kids perform, how did my kids perform, so that we can then instruct or enrich or remediate the students. So it's a grade level connection and ownership.
Okay. So is it only grade? Well, at elementary school, though, they teach all the subjects, right? Or do you have certain teachers teaching certain subjects?
Yeah. So, for example, here at Briar Creek, our 5th grade this year was departmentalized. So two teachers taught ELA and 2 teachers taught math. But then I had a self-contained classroom.
Okay.
Two self-contained classrooms in 5th where the teacher taught all the subject areas. However, the teachers still planned. They made their common formative assessments together. They discussed their students together. So even though you're departmentalized, you're still sharing in the data discussions about the students.
Right. And it only benefits the students in the long run. A lot of times I feel like we, as teachers, we have to put aside our egos, and compromise in terms of when we're working with our colleagues. Because even if we think we're right, at the same time, is it about us or is it about the students? I'm kind of like, I don't know how I did, but I hope, because it has been a while since I've interviewed. In my district, you pretty much interview once and you're in. So that was actually kind of fun for me to challenge myself that way.
Yeah. One thing too, as a teacher, like, let's say it's that time you get the response back, yes, you got the job. And what if you get a no, you didn't get the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when some time passes, right, because you want to make sure that you're in a place to accept it, right? When you want to know, some administrators, if you email them and say, hey, can you give me some feedback?
Right.
Sometimes the administrator will respond to you, depending on the timing of the email, right? If that makes sense, right? Because if it's very fresh, the principal may say, at this time, we just didn't think you were the correct candidate for us.
Right.
And that happens. Know that it doesn't mean it's you, something's wrong with you. The building was looking for something specific.
Right.
Right. And then if you get an opportunity that they give you some feedback, like I needed you to expand more on your opportunities that you do A, B, C, and D. It gets a little hairy with HR and policy laws, like what you can say and why you didn't give the job.
Right.
But you can perhaps get some feedback later time just to say, hey, on this particular question, I said this, like, could I add more to it? Or, be specific, ask for specific growth feedback. And see if the principal or the interview panel, the interview team would give you some pointers to support you along the way.
This is going to be so valuable for my listeners. Thank you so much for not only giving me these awesome questions, but also for talking about your school and how you work with data and with such an interesting population. I know that you're busy and that you still have the rest of the school day to go. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being here on the podcast.
Oh, no problem. No problem. I mean, that's the field of education, is that we work to make sure that teachers coming in get the support they need coming in so that they know this is what principals are looking for when you're taking the position of the teaching role, and any way that you can coach and help teachers before they get their license so they know what's coming.
Right.
It's always an honor. I really appreciate you reaching out to me and asking me to serve on your panel, and to share my current experiences with you has been awesome as well.
Oh, you're very welcome. And where can, if people want to learn more about your school, where can they find you and your school at?
So we're in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we have a website. You can look us up on the web.
Okay.
Briar Creek Elementary. And
do you guys have like a social media account?
We do. We have Twitter, at Briar Creek ES.
Okay. And then how about for yourself? Are you also on there? Can people connect with you on Twitter as well?
People can. People certainly can connect with me. I'm Miss CAP_BCES.
Okay, awesome. And I'll make sure to put that in the show notes so people can link directly to you and get a hold of you if they also want to talk to you about the awesome things happening at Briar Creek Elementary.
Thank you so much. I hope you keep in touch. It's been really awesome to speak with you.
So some key takeaways from this interview. First, I think that Asia asked some awesome questions that I definitely think will give her and her school a good idea of whether or not the candidate would be a good fit for their school. But also, I think for you guys, there's so much for you to get so that you can improve for your next interview. So she asked some really great questions. Also, I love that she talked about data. She mentioned that data is basically essential for assessing progress and moving students forward. So as a new teacher with everything else that you have to think about, you should focus on pre-assessment data and then determining from that data which students need remediation and an extension, and then also have a post-assessment so you know if you need to move on. And then you can also look at the district-provided data for your students so you can get more specific information about your students. Also, it's really important to always do your research about the school you're interviewing with. Pretty much you need to Google everything and know about the school culture and the mission. Finally, if you don't get the job, Asia mentioned that you shouldn't be afraid to email the principal and ask them for feedback on your answers in the interview. They won't be able to give you all the information that you might be seeking, but they can probably point you in the right direction. So I really hope that you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you want to continue this conversation and ask any other questions or advice on the interview process, then head over to the Teachers Need Teachers Facebook group. If you just search Teachers Need Teachers, it'll be easy to find, but be sure to answer the questions. I only allow people who answer the 3 questions on there. They're very simple. I only allow those people into the group. So make sure you do that, or else I'm not going to accept your invitation. There have been some people who have applied for the group who, after looking at their groups that they're part of and their profile in general, I can tell that they're not teachers. And I want to make sure that this group is strictly teachers. So go ahead and head on over there. And if you want to ask me questions in general, just one-on-one, you can email me at kim@teachersneedteachers.com. Have a fabulous rest of the week, and you can expect another episode on Monday.
Thanks for listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. Love this episode? Head over to Apple Podcast or Google Play to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.